Welcome to Conversations from the Edge of Consciousness. I'm your host, Christine Madeira. For me, and possibly for you, the inner world of consciousness has always been much more real and way more fun than the so-called real material world. Growing up, I thought I was alone in this, but I'm not. There are a lot of us, and far too many have no one to talk to who shares this experience. I've been lucky to cultivate a community of friends who love to talk about the energies, ideas, and vibrations that are pushing the edges of our own consciousness, as well as our collective consciousness. In Conversations from the Edge, we share our conversations with you. Welcome to Conversations from the Edge. I am here today with Jana Roemer, and it is our first conversation. With 20 years of study and 13 years of teaching, Jana synthesized her two great loves, Astrology and Yoga Nidra, to create Astro Nidras, which is a lying down meditation where the body relaxes to a sleep state while maintaining full awareness. And this practice both quiets the mind and awakens you to the multitude of transitions that life has to offer. Now, if Jana could add a dimension to your existence, it would be that you long to listen so that you desire to hear every single cell of your body through multiple portals of perception in each and every moment. She believes that we're a species in a state of evolution, and I totally do as well. And she also believes that your body is an ear to the universe, a map to hidden reality, and a gateway to intuition. And that our freedom comes by releasing the imprints of our past from our tissues. And I'm so excited to have this conversation. So welcome, Jana. It's wonderful to have you here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation as well.
Now, is there anything that you would like people to know about you that maybe I skipped or missed in your bio?
I don't think I have much else to say because I think that we're all such mysterious creatures that I'm more interested to see what comes through our conversation.
Okay, perfect. And, if you are tuning in here, our conversation is going to be about astrology and what's coming up in 2021. I'm just going to start by asking you, what is it that's changing in astrology, or what have you noticed in astrology from 2020 that shapes how we are moving forward in 2021?
Well, I feel that 2020 was a redemption year for the validity of astrology, because what we saw through 2020 was, first of all, astrologers have been talking about 2020 for about a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And the extreme nature of what 2020 was not respected or believed even in January of 2020. But as we all know, and we watched the year unfold, every major event, whether it was the breaking of the pandemic, the days of the spread, the fires in California, the Black Lives Matter event, like every one of these events was noted. It was predicted through the astrology.
So I heard, even as I was listening to an astrologer, that the lockdowns were basically, as they happened, lined up exactly to what astrology had predicted.
Yeah. And, we're recording this on the 7th of January. So we just had the DC being stormed in that insanity. And that was even in the astrology. Like that was,
wow.
My girlfriend, who is a fellow astrologer, texted me in the morning and she said, interesting. The last degrees of Mars in Aries starting up a square with the fixed signs in Saturn. And look what's happening in DC. And she sent me a bunch of links. And we both, in horror and giggled at the accuracy of astrology yet again. And this is just the kickoff of what we can expect for the year. A lot of people keep, using the Gregorian calendar. Oh, 2021, it's going to be a new year. And in this astrological world, we kind of giggle. We're wondering why we think that a date is going to change so dramatically, because in astrology, we're in mid renewal. We're in the midst of the breakdown and the deconstruction. And so to expect a change based off the Gregorian calendar, which doesn't align with anything rhythmically other than notes on paper, seems silly. But one thing that is true about the 2021 astrology versus the 2020 is that we are going through more cycle changes.
Oh my gosh, more, really?
More. But always, that's the thing. That's the thing.
Mhm.
Always, we're never not in a cycle change. It's just the extreme nature of 2020. We haven't seen anything like that, nor will we see anything like that again in our lifetime.
Good.
But now we're on a new phase of these cycles where it was a lot of endings, and now we're in beginnings.
Mhm.
But even more so, the theme of 2021, if I were to label a theme for it, it would be disruption.
More disruption.
More disruption.
Oh my gosh.
Because we have what happened on the 6th in the evening. It was after everything was already ignited, is Mars, which is the planet of passion, of war, of penetration. It's Mars is a fiery planet, and it tends to indicate how we get what we want, you know?
Ah, okay.
And it just spent 6 months in Aries, and every planet has a home sign.
Mm-hmm.
And Aries is Mars, one of Mars's home signs, which means that it's even stronger. And so if we look in the mythology, it's the Lord of War, it's the god of war.
Oh my
And
gosh.
when it was in Aries, it is fire and inflammation and agitation and frustration and fighting and anger. And we look at the last 6 months of 2020, and that was really what was going on, you know? And yesterday, or on the 6th, it moved into Taurus, which is the opposite. So in Aries, it's really strong. In Taurus, it's not as strong. But what
Mm-hmm.
Mars tends to do in Taurus is get very stubborn and determined. It
Oh
slows things
dear.
down in Taurus. Yeah, it slows things down.
Mm-hmm.
But what is so typically in a typical year, we would see things get slower.
Mm-hmm.
But this year, we're actually not done with what we started with Mars in the last 6 months of 2020. And this, um, it's called a square. And in astrology, squares, we use a lot of dramatic language,
Mm-hmm.
although I think they're very fitting for this year.
Yeah,
A
totally.
a square is typically a crisis. And in a first quarter square, it's a crisis for a personal. And in a
Mm-hmm.
third quarter square, it's more of a collective or a spiritual crisis. And so we're in this square between Mars and Saturn. And it's the third of three because of retrogrades that we saw in August and September and now January. So we're kind of finishing up. We're working on finishing up unfinished business from 2020 right now.
So as from what you were saying, am I understanding that so we're in the third square, which was more of the spiritual collective crisis or whatever, rather than the personal one? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, yes, but what that's true. But what I actually said was the third in a row of one square. And that
Oh,
happened
okay.
because of retrogrades. So Mars went back and forth and
Mm-hmm.
Saturn went back and forth with the retrograde through degrees. And
Okay, okay.
yeah, so they got, and that was one of the reasons why this last year was so intense, is because of all these retrogrades made for multiple squares or multiple conjunctions or multiple oppositions. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah, yeah.
So what does that mean as we're moving forward with this unfinished business? Like what is the next parts of 2021 looking like
Well,
astrologically?
okay, so I need to correct one thing, is that
Uh-huh.
this square is a first quarter square.
Okay.
It's the third of the first quarter squares. And so
Oh
it's
dear.
personal. Like
Uh-huh.
this is personal. And I think we all see that, we're what it means. So there's a couple different things about Saturn Mars squares. One
Mm-hmm.
is they're the one of the hardest squares in all of the combinations. It's
Oh
one
my
of the
God. How
hardest.
long do they last then?
They're pretty quick,
Okay,
but
good.
because we've had these three,
Uh-huh.
it goes exact on January 13th. So we're in this little pocket of time with a
Mm-hmm.
tremendous intensity. But
Okay.
more so, what we have as a theme over 2021 is a
Mm-hmm.
square between Saturn and Uranus. And so this is the one that I want to break down because I think it's going to have the biggest impact.
Okay.
So Saturn as a planet is the lord of karma, and his tool is time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't get to control the timing of these things. Saturn does. It's called Chronos in the mythology. So Saturn and Uranus, they also are squaring up on the 12th. And
Okay.
that's also a new moon in Capricorn. And the Capricorn was a strong player in 2020. And so we have this, it's like a reactivation of Capricorn. Capricorn is all system structure, government, and matters of authority.
Mm-hmm.
And so because Saturn is moved into Aquarius, which is more innovative. It's the outlier. It's the weirdo. I love Aquarius. Aquarius is one of my favorite signs, and
Mm-hmm.
often Aquarius is misunderstood. But this is happening. The square between Saturn and Taurus is happening in Aquarius, or sorry, Saturn and Uranus is happening in Aquarius and Taurus, but it's happening at the same day as the Capricorn new moon. And so it's a reigniting of a lot of this political upheaval, you know? So if Saturn is karma and time, Uranus is awakening, upheaval, uh, spontaneity, unpredictability. It's quick. It's, it governs light. It governs lightning and
Mm-hmm.
electricity and Kundalini energy.
Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah.
That's an interesting combination. So when these are coming together, then like what kind of ways might this express itself in how we experience this both personally and, kind of in where we are collectively in
Yeah.
these energies?
Yeah, because the square between Saturn and Uranus is a third quarter square. So we have personally in our passion and what
Mm-hmm.
we can do personally to make a difference is one square. And the other square is how are we going to manage this collectively? And how are we going to move as a community or as a bigger humanity to awaken?
Right. Yeah.
And so with this, it's really, really disruptive energy. And on the inauguration day, which is the 20th, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have Mars and Uranus together. And so this tells me, even though we may be getting word that there will be a peaceful transition of power, I don't believe it. I
Mm.
can't believe it from the astrology. The astrology says it's not going to be easy.
Oh, well, we'll see because this should come out a couple of days before that. So we can all hold on to our hats and see what happens. So we've got this potentially tumultuous transition of from one presidency to another in the US, and of course that affects many places around the world. But how does this so as this is happening kind of in the collective, how are we able to bring our own personal work, personal transformation, personal lives into that? Or how are we going to understand what's happening to us personally within that as well?
I think the biggest check-in that we can be doing personally is how are we living and embodying our integrity? I feel like there needs to be a renewal on the definition of integrity
Mm-hmm.
because I see integrity kind of old school and present time. Old school is if you say you're going to do something, make sure you do it. And at
Mm-hmm.
all costs, make sure that you follow through on your promises.
Yeah.
Renewal on integrity to me says everything is changing so quickly right now that our biggest alignment, our most important alignment, our most valuable alignment is the alignment of the integrity of our heart. So
Mm.
if somebody makes a promise or says they're going to do something, but as we're going through this massive transformation that no one is immune from,
Mm-hmm.
everybody is affected by this, that we need to be aligning with the integrity of our heart. And that
Mm-hmm.
means my purpose is what I need to be doing and activating, and your purpose is what you need to be doing and activating. And if I made you a promise that was based off my previous understanding of what my purpose was, but now I have a different understanding of that, it would be dharmic or out of alignment with my higher purpose and
Mm-hmm.
yours to hold me to a previous promise. Does that make sense?
Oh, it totally does. And I mean, we've kind of had that conversation before this started in a different way. I mean, I also take that kind of idea to really be that my integrity is really always checking in with what's going on in my energy centers, in things that are happening, because if I'm making plans or I'm setting, putting something out there that I want to do, and yet the energy in that at that time is, no, this is just not aligned at this time, you need to go do something else, or you need a nap, or for some reason this is not as aligned because something maybe had changed, that it's that inner reflection and realization that this is not the time for that, rather than looking outward and saying, but I made this commitment and I need to honor this commitment. Like,
Yeah.
to me, that's kind of what that is. And also for me, integrity in this new sense is really about being fully connected with your moment by moment unfolding of, I don't like the word truth because it gets bantied around in ways I think are unhelpful, but what is true for your larger sense in the moment. And to begin to shift that focus from looking outward for signals about how to be in the world, and to turn inward to those signals and to honor those above the outward signals, if that makes sense.
100%. And that
Okay.
is, to me, that is so aligned with the astrology, because Uranus in Taurus is a really interesting one to watch because it has extremes in as far as our astrological interpretation. But
Mm-hmm.
one that I've been really focusing on is, so Uranus governs technology with electricity running through it, and
Mm-hmm.
Taurus rules the five senses. Now,
Mm.
Uranus will spend almost a decade in Taurus. It's a long transit. But when we have these activations like these squares, which there's one on January 12th, and then because of retrogrades, we get two more. Like, yes, we get one on February
Yay.
17th, and we get the third one not until December 23rd. So this is literally a theme of 2020. And what I see happening with these squares is collectively, we owe it to each other to help activate each other's intuitions and inner
Mm.
senses. So if Taurus is governing our five senses and Uranus is governing technology with electricity running through it, we are technology. Our bodies are
Mm-hmm.
are electrical technology, and these
Mm-hmm.
inner senses are moving along our electrical circuitry. It's our chemical electrical circuitry.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have this really beautiful opportunity where, if, like what you were saying, if you're feeling off and you do something anyway, the transmission between the two of us is going to be flavored with that offness.
Mm-hmm.
Yet if we honor, and I'm more transparent in my needs and my inner world, and you're more transparent in your needs and your inner world, we
Mm-hmm.
find a cleaner alignment, which sharpens our inner senses. It allows
Yes.
me to trust what I'm feeling with greater ferocity. And I listened to one of your other guests talking about the difference between feelings and emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And she was saying that, and maybe I hope I don't diminish what she was saying, but she was saying that a feeling is a sensation in the body that is transmitted through the nervous system or electrochemical experience, where an
Mm-hmm.
emotion is very similar in that there's this tangible experience of feeling, yet it's often more colored with thought or story
Yeah.
or something from the past.
Mm-hmm.
And what we need to do is sharpen our ability to move more into feeling, where our whole body becomes well, like I said, in what you said in my bio from the beginning, the ear to the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And so in any given moment, if I have a cleaner relationship with my felt sense of awareness through
Mm-hmm.
conversation, through observation, through intuition, then I will have a clear picture of reality in any given moment.
Absolutely. And one thing that would be, I'd like to add to that is, I've been doing more work around really being, really focusing on what actually has benefit versus what just takes up time, space, energy, money, whatever.
Mm.
And realizing that there's a lot of stuff that we do because we say we're going to do, we're supposed to do, we think we need to do it, that when I test it out through pendulum, through intuition or whatever, is one, unnecessary, and two, non-beneficial. So
Mhm.
there's no reason to do it. So when you begin to be open to the idea that a lot of the stuff that we just do because it's habitual that we do, or that we keep appointments that are just habitual to have, that when we look at like what's really beneficial and we begin to step back from the supposed to's to tuning inward and seeing that, we have a lot more time.
Yeah.
And when we do the things that are beneficial, things come together in a much more synergistic way. So
Yes.
we get more done with less effort.
100%. You're clearing the noise. I think it's interesting to just reflect on some of the trends or movements that have come in, this idea of minimalism.
Mm-hmm.
And people have really taken it from the perspective of stuff. But I think what you're saying is a form of minimalism as well. Not that I want to do the minimum that's necessary, but if I minimize my responsibilities or I
Mm-hmm.
minimize my expectations on myself so that I'm only doing what's meant for me,
Mm-hmm.
then we're allowed to become more masterful in that which we are doing. And
Mm-hmm.
as a yogi, I study a lot of the ancient texts and whatnot. And one of my favorite teachings is on dharma or purpose. And, why did we come here?
Mm-hmm.
And the Dalai Lama, he shares that if we knew how hard we had to work to get here, we wouldn't waste a moment of this life, because to
Right.
have a human incarnation, according to the Dalai Lama's teachings, is one of the highest, most prestigious and difficult to get. Like they don't just let
Hmm.
anybody in as a human, is what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
And you mash that up with the Dharma teachings, and now I'm talking Dharma not from Buddhism, but from like a yogic philosophy, or
Mm-hmm.
like purpose teachings. That in the Bhagavad Gita it says it's better to do your own work, your own purposeful work poorly
Mm-hmm.
than the work of somebody else really well.
Yes,
And
I've heard that. It's beautiful and
it's
true.
so, yeah, because it opens up so many possibilities for us to actually be living purposefully through joy.
Mm-hmm. And through, I think, honoring what your own most beneficial rhythm is, because we have kind of this image that a full life means there's a lot going on, that
Yeah.
you've got lots of appointments, you've got lots of engagements, you have lots of, relationships, you have a lot of different things happening, and that we're always busy and scheduled and things. And for some people, that's more of their natural flow. But for many people, and myself included, I would fry all my circuits if I was busy morning to evening. And it's taken years for me to really honor the fact that my flow is my own really unique process and unique flow. And that when I'm doing the things I'm meant to do in my flow, I get everything done. It's
Yeah.
just I do it in a different way than somebody who, has a very full calendar.
Yeah.
So I think there's that aspect as well of really beginning to tune in and pay attention to not just listening to the moment by moment, but listening to the larger flows of what is my best way to live in the world and be in the world. What's my best way to live and be in the world according to my own flow and energy requirements and that sort of thing, instead of to look outside of yourself and say I need to fit myself into this particular style of life.
Yeah, exactly. And so every time we see in the astrology Uranus being activated this year,
Mm-hmm.
what we can experience on a personal level, or may experience on a personal level as well as a global level, is kind of a shakedown. It's just like
Oh.
shaking you like, hey, hey, you're out of alignment. Hey, focus this way. Hey, it's like we're getting a little shakedown. And
Okay.
and so that would be a major theme of the year. But another really big theme of the year that goes right aligned with what we're talking about is that Saturn and Jupiter, who together I call them the social planets, but they're also karmic. They're both karmic planets. And Jupiter spends a year in each sign, and Saturn spends 2.5 years in each sign. However, depending on timing and retrogrades, Jupiter will dip into another sign. And so we have Saturn and Jupiter coming together in Aquarius, and Aquarius is the humanitarian, but Aquarius is also very, very psychic. Aquarius has a direct, like, Aquarius doesn't need a church. Aquarius has a direct line to source. It's, the path to quantum understanding, my husband and I use this term quantumplation. So quantumplation is where you go into a meditation or a trance-like state where you connect to the quantum field and you listen for directive instead of trying to think about what you're doing. And so we have this theme of quantumplation and deeper connection to source and greater psychic connection to each other and futuristic innovation, like a lot of innovation happening. But what Jupiter is doing this year from May until July is Jupiter is during its retrograde it's going to go into Pisces. Pisces is the dreamer. Pisces is the dreamer. And so starting like May 3rd, we're being asked to dream.
Oh, good.
So we have this mixture of the shakedown, like, hey, don't do the things that aren't meant for you. Only focus on the things that are meant for you, coupled with a deeper connection to humanity on a psychic level and this opportunity to connect into the quantum, which leaves room for incredible innovation. And this pocket of time from May, June, and July, where we are being asked to dream. We're being asked to sleep more. We are being asked to dream. And some people would also say that this time of Jupiter in Pisces may be a time of really getting to know our chemical systems in a new way. And I'll elaborate on that just briefly. I think this is deserving of its own conversation when it comes to this time. But I think that collectively we are starting to understand the nature of the mind in a more refined way, in that we have a pharmacy of chemicals inside of us all the time. And this pharmacy of chemicals that's inside of us that we can activate, we can create, we are creating constantly, is vast. It is healing, it is transformative, and it is damaging. All of it, like all of the chemicals, whether it's, oxytocin or dopamine or
adrenaline, cortisol.
Exactly. So for people that don't know what those are, we went from like the love hormones to the stress hormones. Just to simplify. And I think that we're getting better through practices like Yoga Nidra or theta healing or these subtle body awareness practices, where we're getting to understand that we can self-dose and we can radically change the landscape of our chemistry through consciously choosing to feel certain emotions. And we're learning more so in the mystical sciences that we can bring ourselves to these chemicals such as DMT on our own.
Yes,
right?
It's already a natural part of the body. Yeah.
It is. We make it. We are the manufacturer of this on our own. And what I see happening during this Jupiter in Pisces time, which we're going to get a glimpse of this summer, and then 2022 we'll have more of, is the ability to self-dose on whatever it is that you're wanting.
I'm excited to have that conversation as we move closer to May and this happening, because like I've been looking at this for quite some time and experimenting with my own biochemistry, and it's so true and fascinating how much we actually can influence our own bodies and minds when we're intentional and aware and mindful of what we're doing, instead of just going into the habitual self-dosing. Because I say a lot that cortisol is like the number one self-abuse drug on the planet, because we dose ourselves with it all the time.
Always.
Without realizing it. And we do it for energy, we do it for indignation, all kinds of stuff. But we use this consistently in a way that's harming to our bodies and minds.
Yep, exactly. And so, every time we have like a peek into what Jupiter is doing, so that's what
Mm-hmm.
happens this summer, we see things like last year we saw lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the indicators when Jupiter went into Aquarius, we saw lockdown, and now we actually have Jupiter in Aquarius. So I'm expecting to see some more lockdown, and then we'll
Yeah.
get free again.
I hope
Right.
so sometime.
Yeah. But what I think will happen this time is there'll be more shamanic ceremony or more external dosings. So
Mm-hmm.
whether that's people experimenting, and we're actually seeing this happening with, psilocybin as a healing modality, or
Mm-hmm.
different shamanic ceremonies, whether it's ayahuasca or 5-MeO DMT or whatever, there's so many different ones out there. I
Yeah.
think we'll see more of, like, it's already getting more airtime, with books
Mm-hmm.
like How to Change Your Mind and all this stuff. But I think we'll see more people going into like microdosing or understanding what it is. And then once you draw the pathway, this is, one of Ram Dass's major teachings. It's like, sure, you can take it externally and get in the room with God. But what it's really about is learning how to do it internally so that you can
Mm-hmm.
stay in that room. Because if we're taking it externally, the experience is gone when the effect wears off. But if we
Yeah, it's
learn
taking a trip versus like living in the space.
exactly. So I think that will be something that will be really interesting to watch
Yeah.
over 2021. And then another thing that is fascinating to me is that we have 3 Mercury retrogrades, which isn't abnormal. We usually have 3 or 4 Mercury
Mm-hmm.
retrogrades every year. But this year, they're all happening in air signs. Last year, they all happened in water signs, which means way
Mm-hmm.
more emotions. This year, they're happening in air signs. The first one starts on January 30th, and it's in Aquarius, which will give us an opportunity to become consciously more emotionally detached.
Oh, yay.
Consciously, because we're too wrapped up emotionally, and we're not seeing things
Yes.
clearly. So I
Yeah.
think it's going to help us to gain perspective.
Good.
Then in May 29th to June 22nd, it's in Gemini. So another air sign. It's going to be
Mm-hmm.
more about community, duality, like the polar opposites. Gemini is all about polar opposites, the higher, the lower mind, the light,
Mm-hmm.
the dark, the sorrow and the joy, their grief and joy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's going to help us see that, which will then help us rise, because the setup of the first Mercury retrograde giving us a bit of detachment allows us to see in the second Mercury retrograde the continuity between polarities. Like, the only reason we grieve the way we grieve is because we love the way we love, and they go hand
Mm-hmm.
in hand with each other.
They
And then the
do.
third one is starting September 26th to October 12th. And that one's in Libra. And that brings us back into healing our relationships. And so
Wow.
and all air signs have to do with social and
Mm-hmm.
have to do with the nature of the mind. And so, like, what I see potentially in 2021, the disruption is more so the disruption of these really, I mean, obviously everything can go always, but I'm going to go on the way that I'm going to focus on this.
Okay.
This could get really messy as well, and it will for some people. But I see the potential of 21 to be the disruption of the harmful and damaging ways that we live in our minds,
Mm-hmm.
and the opportunity to heal the mind, understand the mind in a more intimate and personal way, where we become the masters of our mind instead of our mind be the masters of us.
Oh, that's the one. We so need that. And it sounds like this first one coming up in Aquarius really sets us up. Like if we begin to take advantage of that, really pay attention to the availability of those energies to find some detachment from our own mental processing and our own emotions, and be able to have a little bit more distance so that we can do some of these other pieces from that more clear space.
Yeah, but we got to do our work.
We do got to do our work. It's so true that we need to do our own work. And it's nice to know what's coming up so we can be really intentional and work with the energies. But I also find when like I just kind of get lost and I'm not paying attention to the energies. But if I'm doing my own work regardless, when I look back, I'm like, and I find out, okay, that was about this, I was right in there. Like, I think when you're doing your own inner work, even if you're not necessarily knowing what's happening in the astrology, it's working through you anyway, as long as you're showing up to yourself in the process.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes. So we don't get to not participate in the astrology. It's just whether you're aware of it or not.
Yeah, and when you're aware of it, or at least you're flowing with what's rising up within you, like you're part of that flow,
Yeah.
even if you're not like glued to, oh my gosh, what does this transit meter? I'm not sure what this means, this square. Like, I don't think if you're an astrologer, obviously you need to know, but if you're doing your own work, you're flowing with that stuff, even if you don't necessarily understand what all of that means, as you listen to somebody like you who really understands how these things work together.
Yeah.
Your body knows.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So are there any other big things that you have to tell us about 2021?
There's a lot, but I think those are the major, to me, those are the major ones. There are
Okay.
some other aspects between Venus and Jupiter, because I always want to give you guys some good hope.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Please give us some hope.
So there are very favorable aspects between Venus and Jupiter. Venus is prosperity, harmony, how we love. Venus is very relational in nature, and it wants to bring more beauty to our lives, And Jupiter as a planet is the guru planet. And I'm very careful the way that I describe Jupiter, because it will, a lot of people in pop culture say Jupiter is always your friend. But the truth of Jupiter is it expands whatever it is that you're focusing upon. So
Okay.
when Jupiter squares Uranus, for example, we didn't talk about that, but that's also happening. If we're really caught up in the Uranus can also be kind of a dictator and shocking to our systems. If we're caught up in that shock side of it instead of the awakening side of it, like the awakening potential of Uranus, Jupiter is going to expand wherever you are on that,
Oh.
So,
Okay.
but Jupiter and Venus have a really beautiful cycle together, and we'll see in February they come together on February 11th, and it's super helpful. It's on the Aquarius new moon when they come together, and so I really think that's a good time to work with your own prosperity and abundance, and however you define prosperity. It can be health. It can be wealth, it can be love, it can be, self-defined. And then in April, we have another really great aspect between, like, it's the reason I bring it up is because basically every other month we have a really nice expansion of our prosperity potential.
If we choose to focus on it.
If we choose to focus on it, that's right. We got to get it.
It's good to know that we have those pockets in there. And it sounds like the one in February is right before Valentine's Day. So if you're focusing on love and romance rather than, oh, I'm alone again this year or blah, 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 that can really help to flower relationships and as well as other kinds of prosperity.
Yeah. Yeah, you can have your love pity party on the 5th of February and then pull yourself out of it by the 11th.
I do like the way that you talk about Jupiter, that it magnifies whatever you're paying attention to, which is another, especially if you're not following these things really closely, to really pay attention to what it is that you're focusing on, because there are energies that magnify. Yeah. And if you're paying attention, like you said, to the shock and to the disruption, like you get more of what you pay attention to. It's like a Facebook algorithm. Whatever you click on, whatever you spend your time looking at, it gives you more because it thinks that's what you want.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for some insights into what's coming up in 2021. And we will continue to revisit some of those and go into more depth as we move forward so that you can really take advantage of what's coming up and doing it from this deep wisdom that Jana is bringing us. So, Jana, is there any last little thing you want to say about the astrology before we sign off this conversation?
one of the things that I do is through my little online portal. We all seem to have them these days,
Yeah.
which is called Attune to the Moon. Is we do journeys. We call them journeys, and we do them for the retrograde. So for people that are like, oh, I want to make sure I get the most of that time with Mercury retrograde, but I don't know anything about astrology, we have these journeys where we break it down. We break it down through the body, through actionable items, through meditation, through these Astro Nidras. And the community that's come together on these is just such a beautiful, welcoming, and open community. We have people of different genders and races and cultures from around the world. And it's so rich to be able to see the different perspectives.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
Yeah, it's really, really nice. And so, one of my missions in this life is to make astrology both accessible to everybody and also not just be something that lives in our head.
Yes, because it really is something that flows through us, whether
Yeah.
we realize it or not.
Yeah.
All right. And so you talked about your portal. Is there any other, would you like to tell people how they can reach you?
Yeah. Well, I happen to know that, when this website goes or this podcast go live, we're going to be in the middle of a soft launch. So shh.
Oh,
A soft launch. So I don't think that we'll have publicly said the website is open, but what we can do is it will be open. And what we can do is I'll give you a code that you can put in your show notes so that people can have 50% off a membership and they can
Okay.
come check it out. Because what we do in there, these Astro Nidras, which is a whole nother conversation, but the short version of what it is these yoga nidras are these laying down meditations where you go beyond the analytical mind and you go and play inside your subconscious mind. And it's a practice of self-observation. And I
Nice.
have them along with the astrological theme. So even if you don't know anything about the astrology, you can lay down, close your eyes, get some deep rest, and reflect on these universal themes that we're all going through. And those are in there. And then these journeys, and then new and full moon circles that we do this all virtually. So there's lots of ways to
Excellent.
connect in. So yeah, I'll make sure that I get you that.
Okay, and I'll have that. You can find all of the links on conversationsfromtheedge.net, and you just scroll down, you find our Jana section, and then all the links will be there for you. So conversationsfromtheedge.net will get you to everywhere, including other kinds of social media or other places that people can connect with you. So it's been wonderful talking with you. I'm really excited for our next conversation. I'm a big believer in astrology, and yet, you asked me what a transit is, and I would say, so I'm really happy that we're connected and we're able to bring not just the technical language, but the deeper meanings to people about what's going on as we move through another really interesting year.
I think it has the potential to be amazing. So
Well, good.
Yeah,
All right. Well, we will.
thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you. And we'll talk with you again soon. This is your host, Christine Madera. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation from the edge of consciousness. You can find all our conversations at conversationsfromtheedge.net. You'll also find links to schedule a private conversation with me or any of my friends, as well as tools to help you expand your own consciousness and explore what's possible for you outside the boundaries of your current perceptions. Feel free to use this podcast to start your own conversation by sharing it with friends, on social media, in your blog, or even in your own podcast. And as always, live the adventure of pushing your own edge. It's the most amazing adventure there is.